You think 32 years of marriage means something. You think raising 2 kids, sacrificing your body, your sleep, your soul, all for family, buys you loyalty, gratitude, love. But what if one day you wake up and realize, it bought you nothing? My name is Roland Thatcher, and 3 months ago, I learned exactly what my life was worth to the people I loved most. It started on a Tuesday morning. Cold, fluorescent, sterile. The kind of morning that makes even the strongest man feel small. Dr. Morrison looked me dead in the eye. Not the way doctors usually do when they're trying to cushion the blow. No, this man didn't sugarcoat anything. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer, he said. 6 months, at best. Those words, they hit harder than any collapsing roof, any explosion I'd ever faced in my 38 years as a firefighter. The walls spun. The lights were too bright. The room too quiet. All I could think was, I need my family. I can't do this alone. So I did what any husband, any father would do. I called them home. Sunday dinner. The same table where we'd celebrated 29 Thanksgivings. Where my daughter had once sat on my knee to blow out her birthday candles. Where my son had once drawn crayon fire trucks on the placemats while I laughed and told him he'd be braver than me one day. I sat at the head of that table, my hands shaking as I told them. Told them I was dying, and what I got in return, my daughter, for Bridget, set down her wine glass, looked me straight in the eye, and asked, "So, when are we reading the will?" I swear the sound that left my chest wasn't even human. Then my son, Colton, laughed. Actually laughed. Checked his watch and said, "Make it quick, Dad. I've got plans tonight. But seriously, the house goes to Mom, right? What about the cars? That Mustang's always been my favorite. And Pamela, my wife, my partner of 3 decades, the woman who once promised to love me in sickness and in health. She didn't cry. She didn't touch me. Didn't even flinch. She just nodded. Calm, cold. It's practical to discuss these things now, Roland. That's when it hit me. The cancer wasn't the only thing killing me. The coldness in that room. It was worse than any disease. The calculation in their eyes. The way they looked at me like I was already gone. A walking corpse with a bank account. That night, when the house went dark and everyone retreated to their corners of indifference, I sat alone at the table, my hands still on the wood that had held 30 years of family dinners. And I made a decision. If all they wanted was my will, then I'd give them one they'd never forget. Because sometimes, the cruelest thing you can do to someone isn't to punish them. It's to show them exactly who they are when they think no one's watching. You see, for 38 years, I was a fire chief in Denver, Colorado. Every morning, I woke up knowing someone's worst day might depend on me. I pulled families from burning homes, held crying children whose parents never made it. Out, I watched rookie firefighters grow from scared kids to brave heroes. Thought I'd seen everything a man could see. But nothing. Prepared me for watching my own family burn down from the inside. When I retired 3 years ago, it was with full honors. The mayor shook my hand. The department lined up in dress blues. Pamela stood beside me, smiling for the cameras. Bridget and Colton sat in the front row, scrolling their phones between applause. I told myself it was fine. They were busy. They had lives. Parents make excuses. It's what we do. We lived in Cherry Creek, not the richest neighborhood, but solid. Our house was built on sweat over time and the kind of pride that money can't buy. Every brick had a story. Every creak in the floorboards, a memory. The basement was my haven, my workshop. 3 cars I'd spent half a lifetime restoring. A 1967 Mustang Fastback, a 1970 Plymouth Barracuda, a 1969 Camaro SS. To most people, just metal and paint. To me, salvation. Each turn of the wrench a reminder that I could still fix something. $500,000 worth of chrome and history, sure, but priceless in the way that matters most. My retirement account? $2 million. Enough for comfort. Enough for them. To live easy when I was gone. At least, that's what I used to believe. Pamela and I met in '92 at a charity dinner. I was serving turkey with the department. She was ladling mashed potatoes with her church group. When our eyes met across that steamy serving line, I swear I felt my whole life rearrange itself. She had this laugh, loud, real, contagious. We talked till sunrise in my truck that night, planning futures we hadn't earned yet. 8 months later, we were married. Before walking her down the aisle, her father pulled me aside, said, "Roland, she's got a good heart, but hearts can change. You keep yours steady, no matter what." I thought it was strange advice. Now I know it was a warning. When Bridget was born, I was fighting a 5-alarm fire in a warehouse district. By the time I made it to the hospital, she was 6 hours old, clean, peaceful, sleeping in her mother's arms. I cried like a child, swore I'd give her everything, and I did. Dance lessons, top schools, a car for her 16th birthday. Every time she called needing help, I said yes, even when it meant more shifts, less sleep, more distance. Then came Colton, born in the middle of a snowstorm. I made it that time, held Pamela's hand through 18 hours of labor. When he came out, fists clenched, I saw myself in him. I taught him everything I knew, how to throw a perfect spiral, change oil, shake hands like you mean it. But somewhere between teaching him how to be a man and being his father, I lost him. He wanted shortcuts, easy wins, fast money, and Pamela. She wanted escape. She called it book club. Every Thursday, but the books never changed. Yoga classes that lasted 4 hours. Texts that made her smile in a way she never smiled at me anymore. I wasn't blind, just hopeful. That's worse in a way. And Bridget, she called when rent was due. Colton, when he needed a small loan. I told myself they'd grow out of it. That family always comes home. But that Sunday dinner proved me wrong, the moment those words left their mouths. The will, the house, the cars. Something inside me went cold. I saw them for who they were, and worse, I saw who I'd allowed them to become. That night I went down to the basement, turned on the single bulb hanging over the Camaro, and started writing. The real will. Not the one my lawyer drew up years ago. No. This one wasn't about money. It was about truth, every dollar, every asset, every memory assigned with purpose, with message, with justice. Because sometimes you have to burn down the old to show people what ashes really mean. The next morning, I called my attorney, told him I'd be revising my estate. He asked if something was wrong. I told him, not yet, but something's about to be very right. From that day on, I started recording everything. Notes, letters, videos, memories. I wasn't dying quietly. I was preparing the performance of a lifetime, because if they wanted a will reading, they were going to get one. I spent my days in that basement, surrounded by the hum of old engines and the smell of motor oil, the only place that still felt alive. The pain was bad, but not as bad as the betrayal. Every cough reminded me of the ticking clock inside my chest. But every line I wrote, every word of that new will, reminded me that I was still in control. Pamela, Bridget, Colton, they thought they'd already won, that they'd just have to wait me out. But they forgot one thing about firefighters. We don't die quietly, we go out fighting. And I was about to light a fire they'd never forget. So when the time came, when that day finally arrived and the lawyer gathered them all in the living room, they sat there, calm, expectant, probably imagining dollar signs behind my name. But the first line of my will wasn't about money, it was about truth. And as they pressed play on the video message I'd left behind, my face appeared on that screen, gaunt, tired, but alive in a way they'd never seen before. I looked right at them and said, "You wanted to know what you're getting. Well, you're about to find out exactly what you deserve. Pamela's face fell first. Bridget tried to hide her smirk. Colton leaned back like he was watching a movie. But what came next wiped the color from their faces, because each gift, each word, each sentence wasn't about what I owned. It was about what I'd learned, about what they'd become. And the more they listened, the more they realized this wasn't a will, it was a reckoning. And for the first time in a long, long while, I finally felt alive, because this wasn't about dying anymore. It was about finally telling the truth, and for Roland Thatcher, the truth was just beginning. Beat, because the will reading, that was only the first chapter. What came after would burn brighter than any fire I'd ever faced, and when the flames cleared, none of them would ever be the same again. Low, steady music fades in. A man's voice, cracked, tired, but steady, begins speaking. You ever have one of those moments where the world stops? Where the noise fades, the air feels too thick to breathe, and the only thing you can hear is the sound of your own heartbeat, reminding you that time is still moving, even if you wish it wasn't. That's what it felt like when the doctor told me the news. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 months to live. Maybe less. It's strange how calm those words sound when they first hit the air, like someone's telling you about the weather. But inside, your whole world shifts. Every memory, every face, every mistake you ever made flashes through your mind in perfect, brutal detail. My name is Roland Thatcher. For 38 years, I was a firefighter, a fire chief to be exact. I'd seen people die. I'd watched homes collapse, seen families torn apart, and I'd always thought I understood tragedy. But nothing prepares you for hearing your own expiration date. When Pamela drove me home from the hospital that day, neither of us said a word. 23 minutes of silence. Just the hum of the tires on asphalt and the soft buzz of her phone lighting up with notifications she didn't answer. Outside, Denver looked the same. The same streets I'd driven for decades. The same skyline, the same distant mountains. But everything looked sharper somehow. More fragile. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed the little things I'd never paid attention to. The crooked mailbox I'd installed last summer. The chipped paint near the porch steps. The cone, oak tree. We'd planted the day Bridget was born, now towering higher than our 2-story house. Those details felt monumental, like anchors to a life that was already slipping through my fingers. I took a deep breath. We need to tell the kids, I said quietly. Pamela didn't look up. Her fingers were already gliding across her phone screen. I'll arrange dinner for Sunday, she said flatly. That gives us 5 days to figure out what to say. By days, I spent them writing and rewriting my words, practicing in front of the bathroom mirror at 3 in the morning when sleep refused to come. I wanted to be honest, but not hopeless, strong but not pretending. I even searched online, how to tell your family you're dying, but no article, no advice column, no late-night forum could prepare me for what actually happened. Sunday came gray and drizzling, rare for Denver. Bridget texted twice. Running late. Client meeting ran over. She arrived 40 minutes past dinner, designer heels clicking on the hardwood floor. She kissed my cheek absently, muttering about traffic and how the rain would ruin her new outfit. Colton showed up a few minutes later, reeking of expensive cologne, wearing jeans that cost more than I'd spent on clothes all year. His phone never left his hand, screen glowing every few seconds like it was the center of his universe. Pamela had cooked roast chicken, my favorite, but the first bite turned to dust in my mouth. We went through the motions. Small talk, laughter that didn't reach anyone's eyes. Bridget talked about real estate, interest rates, and clients. Colton complained about his manager. Pamela mentioned her book club and a weekend trip to Aspen, asking if I'd mind her being gone. Nobody asked how I was. Not once, Even as I sat there, thinner, grayer, weaker than they'd ever seen me, not a single one of them asked how I was feeling. I set my fork down. The sound, the small clink, seemed to echo through the whole room. "I have something important to tell you," I said. Bridget didn't look up from her phone. Colton reached for another dinner roll. Only Pamela met my eyes. And what I saw there wasn't fear. It wasn't love. It was something colder. Calculation. "I've been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer," I said. "Stage 4. The doctors say 6 months. Maybe less." The silence lasted exactly 3 seconds. I counted them. 1, 2, 3. And then Bridget, my little girl, my firstborn, set her wine glass down carefully and said, "So, when are we reading the will?" My heart stopped. Colton laughed. Actually laughed. "Come on, Dad, make it quick, yeah? I've got a date at 8. Traffic's gonna be hell. But seriously, the house goes to Mom, right? What about the cars? I called dibs on the Mustang years ago." I turned to Pamela, waiting for her to say something, to stop them, to show even a shred of decency. She just kept cutting her chicken. "It's practical to discuss these things now, Roland," she said calmly. "No point in being sentimental. Death is a business, like everything else. Death. A business." I felt my chest tighten, not from the cancer, but from something worse. Then Colton, my son, my boy, looked up from his phone and asked, "How much is the life insurance policy again?" "Just trying to figure out my student loans." "Student loans?" I asked. "You graduated 6 years ago." He shrugged. "Yeah, I've been deferring them. Figured once everything gets settled, you know." Bridget was typing something on her iPad now. "The house has to be worth at least $800,000 in this market. Dad, have you considered putting it in a trust? We could avoid probate." And just like that, my living room, my home, turned into a boardroom. My family discussing my death like a transaction. Pamela's phone buzzed. She stood and walked into the hallway, answering in a whisper. "Richard." "Yes, we just found out. 6 months. Maybe sooner if we're lucky." Lucky. My wife of 32 years had just called my death lucky. When the last of them left that night, I sat alone in my study. The only sound was the faint ticking of the old wall clock and the rain tapping against the window. All around me were memories of a man who used to matter, commendations, photos, awards. There I was, pulling a child from a burning house, there again, shaking hands, with the governor after the 2013 floods, every frame captured. A man who ran toward danger to save others. And now, I couldn't even save my own family from themselves. That's when the phone rang. It was my brother. Dennis. He'd heard the news. Families always do, especially when money's involved. "Hey, little brother," he said, his gravelly voice cracking through the line. "Heard about the diagnosis. How you holding up?" I tried to answer, but the dam broke. The tears came like a storm I couldn't hold back. I told him everything. The dinner, the silence, the questions about my will, Pamela's call to someone named Richard. Her voice saying, "Lucky." Dennis didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did, his words cut through me like a blade. "Roland. Remember when Dad was dying?" I nodded silently, tears still running down my face. "Remember what he said? About showing people who they really are? Our father had been a hard man, stern, but wise in ways that only come from a life of work and disappointment. When he was dying, the entire family had gathered. Cousins, aunts, distant relatives, people who hadn't visited in years suddenly appeared when they heard his hardware business was worth millions. He saw the greed in their eyes, the fake concern, the vultures circling, and then he'd done something none of us expected. He told everyone he was leaving everything to charity. The chaos that followed, the yelling, the outrage, the entitlement. It was like watching a mask shatter. Only after that, after seeing their true faces, did he pull out the real will. He rewarded those who had shown love without expecting a reward, and cut out every vulture. Dennis's voice came low and steady through the phone. "Roland, you've got 6 months. You can spend it watching them circle, or you can teach them the last lesson you'll ever teach." And in that moment, the idea struck me. If my family wanted a will reading, I'd give them one they'd remember for the rest of their lives. The next morning, I called Mr. Quinlan, our family lawyer. He'd handled Dad's estate years ago, a man who'd seen the best and worst in people. His office smelled of old leather, ink, and coffee, the same way it had when I was 20. He looked up when I walked in. "Roland, you look tired. I need your help," I said, settling into the chair across from his desk. "I want to schedule a will reading," he frowned. "You mean after you?" "No," I said, voice steady. "Next week." His eyebrows shot up. "You're still alive." "I know," I said. "That's the point." He leaned back, studying me over the rim of his glasses. "What exactly do you have in mind?" "I want you to read a document. Not my actual will, something else. A declaration of sorts." A slow smile spread across his face, the kind reserved for men who've seen too much and understand exactly what's not being said. "I've seen a lot of families destroyed by money," he said, "and a few saved by truth. Which one are you aiming for?" "Maybe both," I said quietly. "Maybe neither. I just want them to see who they've become." We spent 3 hours crafting that document, every line deliberate, every reveal calculated, every truth sharpened to cut through the lies they'd been living. Quinlan even pulled his own strings, checked records, reviewed property transfers, hired a private investigator to confirm what I'd suspected. Pamela and Richard. It wasn't yoga. It wasn't book club. It was betrayal. But that was fine, because now I had a new mission. One final fire to set. When I came home that evening, I played my role perfectly. I called out from the bedroom, voice frail. "Honey, Quinlan says there are complications with the will. Something about Dad's old trust. We'll need everyone there." For the first time in months, she appeared instantly. Eyes sharp, alert. "Complications?" she asked. I nodded weakly. "Tax implications. Some of Dad's arrangements might still affect my estate." And just like that, her mask slipped. Interest flickered where love used to live. "All right," she said, straightening her blouse. "I'll make sure everyone's free." Her heels clicked down the hallway. Quick, efficient, eager, and in that sound, I heard everything I needed to know. 5 days later, they'd all gather again. Same table, same faces, same hunger behind their eyes. But this time, I'd be ready. And when the lawyer read that letter, when my family heard the words I'd written, the truths I'd hidden, the secrets I'd uncovered, they'd realize something too late to undo, that the man they thought was dying quietly had just begun his final fire, and it would burn every illusion they ever built. Because when you take everything for granted, sometimes the only way to make you see is to take everything away. The dinner, the lawyer, the reading, it's all set. They just don't know yet that the real story starts the moment my voice comes through that speaker. Imagine this. You spend your whole life fighting fires, saving strangers, rebuilding homes, putting your body on the line for people you've never even met. You raise 2 children, build a life, buy a house, build a future. And one day, when you're staring down the final months of your own life, you realize that the fire you can't put out is the one burning inside your own family. That was me, Roland Thatcher. When I told them I was dying, I expected heartbreak. I expected tears. What I got instead was calculation. Cold, quiet, greedy calculation. And now it was time for them to face the consequences. Her eyes lit up that night. Pamela's, with an intensity I hadn't seen since our wedding day. But this wasn't love. This was greed disguised as devotion. "When?" she asked, her voice smooth as silk, almost trembling with excitement. "Thursday," I said. 2 o'clock. Quinlan's office downtown. The words barely left my mouth before they spread through my family like wildfire. Within hours, Bridget was calling 3 times a day. Her tone syrup-sweet, every sentence dressed in concern. "Dad, I've been researching treatment options," she said once, voice soft and patient. "There's this new experimental therapy in Boston. Maybe we could try that. Oh, and by the way, did you ever finalize those investment accounts with Vanguard?" I could hear the click of her calculator keys even through the phone. The concern was an act. The math wasn't. Then came Colton, my son, my pride once upon a time. He showed up with a 6-pack of my favorite beer, the one we used to share after long fishing trips. He sat with me, laughed, reminisced about the good old days, about catching that 20-pound trout in Estes Park when he was 12. I almost believed it was real again, until he asked, "Hey, Dad, when you go, does your pension pass on? Or is it like government locked or whatever?" And Pamela, she became the perfect wife overnight. She cooked elaborate dinners I could barely stomach, held my hand as she passed by, even pulled out old photo albums to revisit the good times. But even that, even the nostalgia, came with questions. "Do you remember how much this painting cost?" She'd ask, her finger tracing the frame. I always wondered what it's worth now. Her eyes lingered on the art, not the memory. Then came Wednesday night, the eve of the reading. She sat at the edge of our bed, wearing lingerie I hadn't seen in half a decade. "Roland," she whispered, "whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know I love you. We've built something special together." I looked at her, really looked at her, and felt nothing but sad amusement. "Yes," I said softly, "we certainly built something." Thursday arrived like Judgment Day. The Denver skyline was clear and sharp, sunlight bouncing off the steel and glass towers that cut into the blue. I rode the elevator alone to the 16th floor, each ding of the floor counter sounding like another year of my life ticking away. When the doors opened, Mr. Quinlan was waiting. His office smelled of leather, old books, and coffee. He gave me a grim smile. "Second thoughts?" he asked. "No," I said. "Third and fourth, maybe, but no going back now." Dennis, my brother, arrived next, all-weathered skin and quiet strength. The man looked like Colorado itself, rugged, scarred, and solid. He pulled me into a hug so hard I could barely breathe. "Whatever happens today, little brother," he said, "you're coming home with me after. Maria's got your room ready." And then they came. My family, dressed like royalty walking into a coronation. Pamela in the black Chanel suit I'd bought her for our 25th anniversary, every diamond I'd ever given her catching the light like she was wearing my net worth. Bridget in a designer outfit straight off a runway. Hair professionally styled, makeup flawless, she looked like she was there to close the biggest deal of her career. And Colton, in a 3-piece suit, shoes shining like mirrors. For a second, I almost didn't recognize him. The performance was perfect. The devoted family, united by grief, or so they thought. "Thank you all for coming," said Quinlan, his voice calm but heavy. We sat around a long mahogany conference table, the Denver skyline glittering beyond the windows. I could see my reflection in the glass, pale, tired, but resolute. "This is not a last will and testament," Quinlan began, opening a thick leather folder. "This is a declaration of truth, from Roland James Thatcher, being of sound mind and broken heart." Bridget froze. Pamela blinked. Colton smirked, thinking it was some kind of joke. Quinlan continued reading, his voice steady. "To my family, who showed me that love has a price tag, your reaction to my diagnosis revealed more than any confession could." Pamela's hand tightened around her purse. "Bridget," he read, "you asked about the will before you asked about treatment options. You spoke of tax implications while your father sat before you dying. I never taught you that money mattered more than mercy. Yet, that's the lesson you learned." "Dad," she whispered, "this isn't funny." "Colton," Quinlan read on, You checked your watch while I told you I was dying. You asked about the cars before asking about my pain. You made dinner plans while calculating funeral expenses in your head. The boy I taught to ride a bike has become a man who rides through life on other people's efforts. This is ridiculous, Pamela snapped. Roland, what kind of sick game is this? Quinlan didn't even look up. Pamela, you nodded when our children treated my death like a business transaction. You called Richard within an hour to tell him the good news. Yes, I know about Richard, the man from your book club, the one you've been planning a future with, using my life insurance as a foundation. The room went dead silent. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to stop. Quinlan's voice was calm, but it cut like a blade. Effective immediately, all of Roland Thatcher's assets, excluding a modest living allowance, have been transferred to the Roland Thatcher Charitable Trust, to be managed by his brother. Dennis! Bridget's mouth fell open. What? What does that mean? It means, Quinlan said, the house will be sold. The proceeds will go to the Denver Fire Department's Widow and Orphan Fund. The car collection has already been donated to the Veterans Foundation. The investment accounts? Liquidated. Dispersed to cancer research and firefighter scholarship programs. Bridget's legs gave out. She dropped into her chair, her voice trembling. No, 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 this can't be legal. Colton leaned forward, desperate. Dad, please. We were just in shock. We didn't mean it. You can't do this. But Quinlan wasn't finished. The vacation home in Vail, which none of you knew existed, has been transferred to a rehabilitation center for veterans and recovering addicts. Colton fell to his knees beside me, clutching my hands. Dad, please, I'll move back home. I'll take care of you, drive you to every appointment. I'll change. I promise I'll change. Pamela rose to her feet, trembling with fury. 32 years, Roland. 32 years I gave you. And this is how you repay me? I raised your kids, kept your house, stood by you. You owe me! Quinlan calmly pulled out another folder. Actually, according to these text messages between you and Richard, you've been planning to, and I quote, wait out the old fool and take everything he worked for. Would you like me to read more? There's a particularly colorful message about hoping he doesn't retire early because you need more time to move money to your private account. Pamela's face drained of color. Then red flooded back in, then a shade beyond rage. Bridget started sobbing, her perfect makeup streaking down her face. She fumbled for her phone, frantically calling her real estate partners, trying to explain why the investment she promised was suddenly gone. Every call went to voicemail. Colton kept whispering, "Please, Dad, please," as if repetition could undo what was already done. Pamela stood there shaking, her voice cracking like glass. You can't do this, Roland. You can't just take everything from us. But I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I felt calm. I didn't take anything, I said softly. I just gave it back, to the people who deserve it. Her mouth opened. But before she could speak, Quinlan read the final line. Pamela Thatcher will receive only what the prenuptial agreement stipulates, the 1998 Honda Civic and her personal belongings. Divorce proceedings begin tomorrow. Her attorney, whom she's been paying from a joint account, has already been notified. The conference room erupted. Bridget screamed. Colton slammed his fists on the table. Pamela cursed through tears. I just sat there, quiet, still, feeling something I hadn't in months. Peace. And in that silence, as their voices broke against the walls of that high-rise office, I looked out the window, at the mountains standing in the distance, unshaken by time or greed, and thought, maybe my father was right. Father, maybe the only way to reveal someone's true nature is to burn away everything they think they own. But as I watched Pamela crumble, Bridget call in vain, and Colton beg for forgiveness, I couldn't help but wonder, when the ashes settle, will any of them find a way back to what truly matters, or has the fire I lit already burned too deep to ever be put out? Soft piano fades in. Then, silence. A single inhale, the kind before truth is spoken. You ever have a moment when the mask finally slips? When everything you thought you knew about the people closest to you suddenly fractures? That was the day I stopped pretending. The day I realized love without respect isn't love at all. It's just a transaction dressed as affection. She pointed that manicured finger at me, the same one that used to trace the back of my hand when we were young and foolishly in love. "You'll regret this, Roland," she said, "when you're dying alone. When you need someone to hold your hand in hospice, remember this moment." Her voice echoed in that quiet office. Sharp, cold, final. But before I could even speak, Dennis stood. Calm. Steady. His presence filled the room like gravity itself. "He won't be alone," he said, his voice low but certain. "Roland's coming to live with Maria and me at the ranch. Our children, his real family, have already prepared his room. We'll be with him every step of the way. Not because of what he has, but because of who he is." That silence after his words, it wasn't empty. It was the sound of masks cracking. Quinlan, the lawyer, adjusted his glasses, gathering his papers with quiet precision. "The original will," he said slowly, "was simple. Everything divided equally among you three. Roland wrote it that way because he loved you. But love without respect is just obligation. And obligation without genuine care." He paused, looking straight at my family. "Is just greed waiting for an opportunity." No one spoke. I stood to leave. For the first time in months, my legs didn't shake from weakness. They held me. Firm. Steady. The weight crushing me for weeks wasn't the cancer. It was the act. The performance of pretending my family still loved me. As I reached the door, I heard my son's voice, Colton. The same voice I'd once read the bedtime stories to, now lined with anger. "Dad, how could you do this to us? We're your family." I turned back, looked at the three people who'd once been my entire world. "I didn't do anything to you," I said quietly. "I simply showed you what you did to yourselves. Because when someone tells you they're dying, and your first thought is about money, you've already lost everything that matters. The inheritance they wanted so desperately, they'd already received it. Years ago. In every overtime shift I worked, every birthday I missed, every night I came home exhausted but still managed to smile. They spent that inheritance not on cars or houses, but on indifference. And indifference, my friends, is the most expensive thing you can buy." Soft instrumental swells in, warm and reflective. 3 months later, I was living at Dennis's ranch. Cancer still there, yes, but so was something else I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Maria cooked with love, not obligation. Her meals weren't fancy, but they tasted like care. Their kids, good kids, drove 2 hours every weekend just to sit on the porch and listen to my stories. They didn't ask about money or property or legal documents. They asked about my pain levels, my favorite memories, whether I wanted to watch the sunset from the east pasture or the west field. Do you know what that does to a dying man? When someone asks what brings you peace instead of what you'll leave behind, it's healing in its purest form. My nurse, Joyce, visits twice a week. She's seen death, more times than anyone should. Yesterday, as she was changing my IV, she said something that hit harder than any diagnosis ever could. "Mr. Thatcher," she said, "I've seen a lot of people die. The ones surrounded by genuine love. They glow differently. The ones surrounded by greed, they fade before they're even gone." She smiled at me. "You're glowing, Roland." And I realized she was right. Pause. The sound of wind and grass. A soft exhale. Bridget sent a letter last week. 4 pages. Apologies. Promises. Claims of transformation. Said losing the money taught her what really matters. But Dennis intercepted her call to a lawyer. Turns out she was asking about contesting the charitable trust. Old habits die harder than cancer patients, I suppose. Colton called 17 times before Dennis finally blocked his number. His last voicemail, he admitted he'd borrowed money against his expected inheritance. Now he owed dangerous people. He wasn't calling out of love. He was calling because he needed me to save him one more time. And Pamela? She moved in with Richard the day after our divorce was finalized. Maria heard through church friends that they're already fighting. Apparently, Richard thought Pamela was wealthy. Pamela thought Richard was her ticket to luxury. Two con artists who conned each other. A poetic kind of justice, if you ask me. But let me tell you something I've learned these last months. Cancer doesn't kill you all at once. It's slow, merciless. It takes you piece by piece, organ by organ, breath by breath. But watching your family reveal who they truly are, hearing your daughter calculate your worth. While your heart still beats, watching your son check his watch. As you announce your death, feeling your wife's relief that you'll soon be gone, that kills you instantly. But in that death, something else was born. The truth. Raw, unforgiving, liberating. I have less than 3 months left now. The doctors say it's spread to my bones. Every movement feels like fire. Morphine dulls the pain, but it can't numb the clarity. Because pain, real pain, has a way of sharpening your vision. You start seeing people for who they are, not who you want them to be. And I see it now. I see everything. Dennis reads to me every evening, sometimes scripture, sometimes Steinbeck. Maria holds my hand through the nights when even breathing feels like a betrayal. Their kids call me Uncle Roland. They mean it. No hidden motives, no inheritance, just love. And that, my friends, that's wealth. When I die, the charitable trust I set up will help families who've lost everything. Firefighters' widows will get support I couldn't give while chasing my own family's approval. Cancer patients will get treatment I can't afford for myself. Kids who lose their parents will have a future, and all because I stopped letting greed define the meaning of love. That's what I want this story to do. For you, for whoever's watching right now. To make you think. About what family really means. About what you'd choose when everything else is stripped away. Because sometimes it takes facing death to finally understand life. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what you never had. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give your family is showing them exactly who they are. Even if that reflection shatters the illusion you spent a lifetime building. Soft strings rise, then a faint crackle, like a fire pit on a cool evening. The cancer may be winning against my body. But that day in Quinlan's office, I won something far greater. I won my dignity back. I won my truth back. I won my freedom. From the lie that love can be measured in inheritances. My name is Roland Thatcher. Once I was a fire chief, a husband, a father. Now I'm just a man dying honestly, surrounded by people who love me for my stories, not my savings. And for the first time in my life, I feel rich. You know, the sunsets hit differently out here. The sky burns orange, then fades to violet. Maria says it's God's way of reminding us that endings can still be beautiful. Maybe she's right. Maybe we all get one last sunset to make peace with the world before the darkness comes. And maybe, just maybe, someone out there watching this needs to ask themselves one question tonight. When your sunset comes, will the people beside you be there for your love or for your will? Music fades. Only the wind remains. A door creaks open, then closes softly. Some stories don't end when the body does. Some truths keep living in the people who finally learn to see. And sometimes, the ones who glow the brightest are the ones who learned to let go. The music swells, faint but hopeful. Because in the end, Love isn't about what you leave behind. It's about who stays, when there's nothing left to take. And somewhere out there, under a fading sunset, an old man named Roland watches the horizon, smiling, because for the first time, he isn't afraid. He's already home,